We do have some of our legal analysts waiting in the wings here. We're going to bring them in, including my friend, former federal prosecutor and legal analyst, Neama Rahmani. He joins me. Neama, thanks for being with us here. I know you've been watching this alongside us. What a stunning course of events here. I don't think anyone saw this coming. Let's just go back briefly. How did we get here today? We had the witness list. We were told possibly one of those witnesses today was going to be Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. And then all of a sudden, the defense made this motion for a mistrial. What were they alleging, Neama?
What a shocking turn of events, Andrew, and one of the most botched prosecutions in American history. Today, we were supposed to hear from Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, or at least hear her assert her Fifth Amendment privilege. But turns out the prosecution hid evidence, potentially exculpatory evidence from the defense, and apparently did so intentionally. And as a sanction, the judge issued the harshest sanction she possibly could, and that's dismissing the entire case with prejudice, which means that the prosecution can't refile. It's over. Alec Baldwin's a free man. And frankly, this may affect the integrity of the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed conviction because the evidence was arguably exculpatory as it pertains to her as well. The prosecution has always argued that Gutierrez-Reed brought the live rounds on set. That was a consistent theme in her case, as well as Alec Baldwin's. But it turns out that it may have been someone else. Kenny, a prop store where the live rounds may have come from and not Gutierrez-Reed herself. So now it's not just one case, right, but two that may go by the wayside.
I mean, that is just stunning. I mean, that was the main question that we thought was answered after the conviction of Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. She brought the live rounds on the set and she put them in the weapon that Alec Baldwin was holding at the time it went off, shooting Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, killing her, and the director, Joel Souza, injuring him as well here. When the defense makes a motion like this, the trial itself pauses, and that's what we were watching. We saw the kind of mini trial underway here for the motion that they alleged to be adjudicated and for the judge to rule on. And so what we saw in that was the prosecutor, Carrie Morrissey, taking the stand there, explaining herself as well. Was that customary or was that unusual? Had you ever seen that before?
It's very unusual where you have a prosecutor on the defense trying to explain herself. Of course, recently we saw it with Fani Willis in Georgia in the election fraud case there in Fulton County. And anytime you're a prosecutor and you're on the stand as a witness and you have to explain your conduct, you've done something wrong. And obviously, we talked about the Willis case at length, but here you have the special prosecutor in the case, Ms. Morrissey, having to explain why she didn't disclose that evidence, why she placed it in another file. And that is the cardinal sin if you're a prosecutor. You have to disclose certain categories of evidence, the most important of which is potential exculpatory evidence. And that's pursuant to a famous United States Supreme Court case called United States versus Brady. Anything that may be Brady material that may allow a finder of fact, whether it's a juror or a judge, to find that someone is actually innocent, that exonerates them, that has to be disclosed to the defense. And if you don't do that, you are breaking your oath as a prosecutor, not to convict everyone, but to find justice. So what happened today was a miscarriage of justice. And the prosecution in this entire case, and the reason I say it's botched, has made one mistake after another. And we're talking about constitutional violations. The first was when they unconstitutionally charged Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed with an enhancement that was passed by the New Mexico State Legislature after the Russ shooting. You cannot apply criminal laws retroactively. That's a violation of the ex post facto clause of the Constitution. And if you recall, the prosecution originally in this case, they wanted to charge Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed with a 5-year mandatory minimum enhancement. That means if convicted, both of them would have to serve at least 5 years in New Mexico State prison. Well, that enhancement was unconstitutional. It was stricken. Then the district attorney appointed special prosecutors in this case that were members of the New Mexico State Legislature. That's also a constitutional violation, a separation of powers issue. You can't have someone working for the prosecution which is the executive branch, as well as the legislature, which is the legislative branch. And now, of course, the biggest violation of all, that Brady violation. And the judge had just had it, and justifiably so.
Yeah.
She dismissed the entire case.
Neama, though, when Carrie Morrissey got on the stand there in this hearing, was it a foregone conclusion at that point that the prosecution was doomed, in your view?
I don't know if it was a foregone conclusion, but we
Okay.
could read the tea leaves. When the judge sent the jurors home for the day and cleared the day to hear this motion and to hear testimony, there was the real possibility that this was going to happen. The prosecution had to have some very good inadvertent reason as to why this disclosure wasn't made, and they didn't have it. It turns out that the disclosure was actually intentional, or at least that's what the judge found, and that's why the case was dismissed.
Are you surprised with the rapidity with which this was dismissed by the judge, by Judge Summer there? This was not even 4 hours, and she made her ultimate ruling there on whether or not this should go forward. And I think it's important to make that stipulation for the viewer, because the viewer can't see the jury in the room. The jury was not in the room for the entire duration of this motion hearing, and that she was sent home for the day by the judge there. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to make that note again because the camera doesn't show the jury. Obviously, they weren't in the room for all of this, and you're saying that was somewhat of a bellwether.
It was, and judges don't like to waste juror time.
Okay.
So they want to take advantage of every day that the trial is going to take place. And this was only going to be a 2-week trial, about 5 days for the prosecution, 3 days for the defense. So to lose an entire Friday to hear this motion, that's something that the judge took very seriously, issued the ultimate sanction, terminating sanctions, as we call them in the legal world. And the case is terminated, and Alec Baldwin is a free man.
Do you think that Carrie Morrissey will be sanctioned?
Oh, I think she may be sanctioned. She may be looking at state bar issues. I wouldn't be surprised if the district attorney who oversaw this entire botched case loses her job.
Neama, I got to interrupt here. We do have the prosecutor. Let's listen. All right, didn't want to miss that. Can't really hear it, unfortunately, there. Carrie Morrissey leaving the courthouse. I'm still with former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani there as well. Neama, didn't mean to cut you off. We got to do that sometimes here, but please continue here. We were just talking about Carrie Morrissey. I had asked you, due to her performance, will she be sanctioned? I mean, how much of a violation for any prosecutor is this? How bad of a day did Morrissey have today?
Oh, it doesn't get worse than this. This is something that, and she's a special prosecutor in the case. She was brought on to handle this case, but it's also telling that her co-special prosecutor decided to resign today. It's almost like resigning while charges are pending. She did not want to take the stand. She did not want to participate in a public hearing. Morrissey did. She tried to defend her actions, and she was unsuccessful. So this will go down as a really dark day for prosecutors, because let me tell you something, Andrew. This is something that you learn, and it's your first day as a prosecutor. Any first-year law student will tell you the following: that it's better that 10 guilty men or women go free than an innocent person suffer. And this is something that came from Justice Blackstone in the UK, where we learned that it's not just about winning when you're a prosecutor. You have to do the right thing. You have to disclose everything to the defense. You cannot hide the ball. And prosecutors are held to a higher standard. Unlike attorneys in civil cases, unlike even criminal defense lawyers who can represent guilty people, you cannot do that as a prosecutor. And if you violate that oath, absolutely, your case will be dismissed. You can be sanctioned. You can even be terminated.
So, Neama, I want to put up this tweet here from Fox producer Sean Langeal. It kind of goes into a little bit more of the technicalities at play. He said Alec Baldwin's motions to dismiss the shooting charges on the Rust movie set have been dismissed. Yesterday, the defense revealed that a retired police officer had turned in rounds, which he thought to be linked to the Rust set. You know, those are some of the outstanding questions still from this story. And I've been covering this story since it happened in late October of 2021. How many live and dummy rounds were on the set and who brought them there? That question remains outstanding, does it not?
It does. And let's get into some of the details. So there's a retired police officer from a neighboring county that approached the law enforcement agents in this case and said, I have some rounds from another individual, an individual named Kenny. Now, the retired police officer was actually friends with Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father, who was a famous armorer, and how Hannah got the job in this case. And he said, I believe that the rounds in this case came from this other individual, this other company, and not Hannah herself. What the prosecution did is, based on the color of the rounds, they rejected this evidence and they didn't provide it to the defense. They just disregarded it outright. Well, that's not a decision for law enforcement to make. And it's certainly not a decision for prosecutors to make. If you receive something as a prosecutor, you have to disclose it to the other side. Let them make whatever arguments they want. You
Yeah.
can't decide unilaterally that this evidence is not supported by the facts or the law. That's something for a judge and jury to decide.
I see. Neama, we didn't hear from Baldwin afterward. We thought maybe we would hear from his attorney. Alex Spiro, his attorney, money well spent, Neama?
No, money well spent, no question. And, I've litigated against him. I'm litigating against him right now. He's a very well-respected and well-known lawyer from my law school, Harvard Law School. So we produce the best, but he's very good and his lawyers did an outstanding job. And I tip my hat to them, and they deserve credit for pushing the prosecution in this case at every possible moment and calling them out on their constitutional violations. So I got to give credit to Spiro, the Quinn Emanuel team, and Alec Baldwin did a good job not pleading in this case and pushing the case to trial, and ultimately he prevailed.
All right, Neama, stay with us. We do have new sound here from Kerry Morrissey. Let's listen.